On this week's edition of the Loud Nerd in the Basement podcast, I go over a Star Wars anime series being announced, Mr. Terrific getting his own TV show on HBO Max, and more behind the scenes drama on Supergirl. All this and more on the Loud Nerd in the Basement podcast. Well, welcome back to another Friday News Roundup edition of the Loud Nerd in the Basement podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam Zonai, owner and sole writer of the Loud Nerd in the Basement Substack. Thank you so much for listening, however you may be listening. As always, this podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, of course, Substack, and YouTube. I highly recommend you check out the YouTube channel. I've been putting up a lot more shorts lately. I'm having fun doing those, and I'll continue to just experiment with that format. But it's fun because it's another way that I can interact with you guys, and I can kind of be a little bit more loose and a little bit more ad-libby, I guess would be the word, although that's not really a word. But hey, all words are made up. A little bit more loose on those as opposed to the podcast here, which has a lot more structure, obviously. And I'll continue to experiment with the YouTube channel. I've got some ideas of maybe other ways that I can interact with you guys and do some other fun stuff on there. It's just a matter of finding time in the schedule and the means to do it. So working on that, but I'll keep you updated. And as always, if you want to get the full experience here at Loudner in the Basement, I offer a paid tier of $6 a month or $50 a year, so not too expensive, not much more than a cup of coffee, or way less than what you would pay for any streaming or subscription service. I can guarantee you that. And with this paid tier comes perks. So with that, you'd be able to submit questions that I would answer here on the podcast. I got one today that's really fun. Can't wait to dive into that later. Also, you would get access to spoiler articles of all new major blockbusters. I just uploaded one for Supergirl, so you would have access to that and hear all my spoilery thoughts on that movie. And you would also get access to my monthly rewind reviews where I review an older movie, and you get to actually submit your own requests for what movies you want me to review. So you get to kind of guide the articles that I write. So that's another fun thing that you get to do. And I have a rewind review coming out next week that was submitted by one of our paid subscribers. It's called Mystery Men. It's an old 90s movie, a superhero comedy movie, really ahead of its time in many ways, but you'll have to read the full review to hear my thoughts on that. Thank you so much to all of you who have been paid subscribers. I really, really mean it. Your support has helped me be able to go see movies. It's added money to my budget to where I can buy movie tickets. As we all know, movie tickets are not cheap anymore unless you're over a certain age, and I am not there just yet. So I appreciate your support, and even for the free subscribers, I appreciate your support too. Because obviously, just listening, liking, subscribing, rating my podcast, liking my Substack articles, all of that helps so much, and I really, really appreciate it. I love that I get to do that, and I love that I get to do all of this, and I have no plans of stopping anytime soon, and your support helps make sure that I can continue to do even more. So I really, really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get into some news. Another light news week. I think we'll start to get lighter until a couple weeks from now when we hit San Diego Comic-Con. There's going to be a bunch of Marvel news coming out of there for sure, and we may get even some DC news and just who knows what else. So that podcast will probably be extra long, but in the meantime, we might see lighter news weeks until then, just because a lot of studios are going to be holding stuff back until they get to present it at Comic-Con with as many eyes on it as possible. So if these podcasts are short the next couple weeks, that's probably why. I imagine the San Diego Comic-Con episode will probably be really, really big. So be prepared for that. I'm excited to report everything that gets reported or gets dropped there, and I'm sure it'll include a lot of Avengers Doomsday stuff. But what we do have is some Star Wars news. So Lucasfilm and Disney actually just released the first trailer for a anime Star Wars show that will be premiering on Disney Plus and Hulu, which is interesting. Disney owns Hulu now, and they've been kind of slowly merging those two streaming services together, and I wonder how much longer Hulu itself will actually be around before it's just fully merged into Disney Plus. I'm really interested to see when that takes place because it feels like that's where we're headed. But the show is called Star Wars Visions Presents The Ninth Jedi. Now, if you've been a huge Star Wars fan and watching everything, you've known that they had a anthology show called Star Wars Visions, where different animation studios all did little shorts based in the Star Wars universe. Some of them were from big studios, like this one did big animes such as Ghost in the Shell. So if you're a big anime fan, this is a very prestigious studio. You probably recognize the art style. I'm not a big anime fan, so I know of Ghost in the Shell, and I'm aware of a lot of the big anime shows in that space. I just haven't watched them, but I know what kind of weight this studio holds. But I mean, you've had the Wallace and Gromit guys did a short in one of the seasons, but the big thing is that this studio had done two shorts with these characters in seasons 1 and 3, and then got their own uh, TV show called The Ninth Jedi. And the main character's name is La Kara, and she debuted in episodes called The Ninth Jedi in the first season, and then in the third season was a follow up called Child of Hope, and now she's getting her own full story on Disney Plus on August 5th. And it takes place, according to the creators, far in the future after the original and sequel trilogy. So this is way in the future, way after all of our known heroes have been long dead and gone, which I think is a smart idea and a cool way to do it, where it's just, yeah, we could jump thousands of years into the future, just like the comics and books have jumped thousands of years in the past before. You know, that's the fun thing about Star Wars, is you can kind of push it wherever. And I think setting it in a place where you don't have to worry about it interfering with any other continuity really is a great idea. And watching the trailer, again, as not a big anime fan, I thought it looked pretty good. The animation looked great. The character designs look really cool while also within feeling Star Warsy, I should say, where it's just you can kind of see the natural progression of, oh yeah, that's how probably a Star Wars ship would look, 1,000 years into the future, or a droid how they would look, 1,000 years into the future. And it looks great. The voices sound fine. Again, obviously it's a 2-minute trailer, so you're only going to hear a lot of lines out of context, but everything sounded fine. It looks great. If I had one big complaint, is that it looks like we're going to be dealing with another planet destroying super weapon, and I am getting a little tired of that constantly showing up in Star Wars. Like, I know that is a thing, especially with the Sith. A lot of Sith stories culminate in them having some kind of super weapon of some sorts, which makes sense, but at the same time, it would be kind of nice to just have a Jedi versus Sith plot that doesn't involve that. We've had that in 2 trilogies now, and I'm ready for us to kind of move on from that for a little bit, or at least have a different take on it other just than big space laser that obliterates planets. But that's what we do see in the trailer. But what's interesting is the overall theme of the show, where it's really going to explore what it means to be a Jedi or a Sith. And one of the creators was quoted as saying, when talking about Kara, the main character, they said, quote, Luke was also an unknown boy, not talented in the beginning, and he gradually becomes a true Jedi. We tried not to make Kara look like a master from the beginning, but she's gradually growing. In the original story of the Ninth Jedi, Kara's not trying to win over her father or someone else. She's trying to win over herself and grow as a person. I feel like she's a very modern character. She already has a natural kind of talent in her. When she was chased by Jedi hunters, the hunters also saw something in her, even though she didn't know. And a main theme of the Ninth Jedi is that things aren't always black and white, dark and light. And I'm fine with that. Knights of the Old Republic, if you have had any interaction with that material at all, that is a major theme in there where it's like, what does it mean to be a Jedi? What does it mean to be a Sith? And how big of a box does that idea fall into? I really always appreciate when writers are cleverly able to do that and play with that kind of concept. The Acolyte tried to do that, but in my opinion, it was not really well written and didn't really the story and characters that they tried to explore those themes with were really built on shaky ground in my opinion, and especially again seeing it done better in Knights of the Old Republic. I'm excited for this because it looks like they might be more on the Knights of the Old Republic side of it uh than the Acolyte. Plus, it's an anime studio that sounds like, based on what I know of the animes that they've worked on, really are good at exploring themes like good and evil. What does that really look like and mean? What does it mean to be human? What has a soul? What doesn't? Like, it sounds like they have a record of dealing with this kind of stuff. So I'm really excited for this. And one of the creators even said, quote, "There's a contradiction that Jedi want to make peace, but there are some things they can't solve with the Jedi Order only. Everyone has to have some kind of dark side to solve something, to be good. But do you call it a completely dark side? We wanted to create a new definition of a Jedi. Kara is pure light side, but the villain Nuwam reflects the duality of humans." And I think that could be really interesting and a lot of fun. And again, I think what helps is that setting it so far in the future, you don't have to worry about exploring that idea and ruining a character that's already been established in canon as either a good guy or a bad guy. And I think that's also where the Acolyte faltered. It's like, you can't have this whole idea of a Jedi, mass cover up, and then also implicate guys like Yoda and Cal Mundi in there, where it's like, well, we already know where their story ends up, and if something like this happened, there's no way, based on what we know of those characters later on, that they would ever be privy to this kind of stuff. And so I think moving into the far future, exploring these themes and ideas with characters that are original, again, not doing it with like Luke Skywalker or anything like that, I think that's a great idea. I might check this out if I have time. The problem is that there's so much out right now, and to have it come out in August when Lanterns is coming up, X-Men 97 is in full swing, so is House of Dragon. It's like, man, and I haven't even watched The Bear. That's another one that I have to watch, and it's just, there's so many TV shows out right now that's like, I just don't know if I'll have time to watch this right now. But it might be something where down the line, when there's not as much coming out, I'll check it out for myself just to kind of see how it is, especially because it doesn't sound like I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of episodes. My guess is probably the usual 10 to 13. So I'm excited for this. I think this is the kind of stuff you can do with Star Wars, where it's like, give it to someone who has a track record of doing great stories and great animation, and let them just play in this world. Again, give them let them do an original story. Don't have to have it be Han, Luke, or Leia, or Anakin and Obi-Wan. Let them play in this sandbox, and I think that's the problem that Star Wars has had, where it's either A, you give it to someone who doesn't have that track record, and so it's like, oh God, I hope this works out, or B, you have them attach it to something that's already been pre-established, so it really constrains what you can do, and then you have to hope that they're a good enough writer to work within those parameters, like Andor did, where they just did a masterful job of weaving themselves into canon while also telling an interesting story where you never felt like, there's no way this all happened right before Luke Skywalker blew up the Death Star. Instead, it just made what Luke Skywalker did even more impressive and cool, in my opinion. So I'm excited for this. I think if there can be more of this kind of attitude and thinking with Star Wars, I think Star Wars can slowly build back up into a more healthy state. So I'm hopeful. But moving on to a different franchise that's having some issues, the DC Universe. Mr. Terrific is getting a TV show on HBO Max. The showrunner is going to be Alan Heinberg. He worked on Netflix's Sandman series based on the Neil Gaiman book. He also helped as a writer for Wonder Woman and has done multiple episodes of TV for shows like The OC and Grey's Anatomy. So this is very much a guy who knows how to make a TV show and write a TV show. And I think this is what you can use HBO Max for. These are the kind of characters that you use HBO Max for, where it's like, okay, I don't think you can give Mr. Terrific a movie like as cool as that character was. It's like I don't know if there'd be an interesting enough premise you can make for a movie that would be profitable, especially if Supergirl flopping as much as it has. Trying to then do that with Mr. Terrific, where you still don't have a Batman and Wonder Woman, it's like, yeah, now's not the time for a Mr. Terrific movie, but a TV show, I'm down for. And also, it makes sense with his power set that's a TV show, especially because you already have all the CG models from Superman already built, and you have all those assets made already. You won't have to do as much heavy lifting budget wise with CG. Plus, it's not like he has superpowers that need a lot of visual effects, so that also helps, I think. So you can get away with making this for a lot less expensive than something like a Lantern show or a Superman show or something like that. So you can look good, but also not cost $50 billion. So I'm excited for this. I hope it's good. I imagine if it's being announced now, we're probably not going to get it until, man, my guess would be probably 2028 would be my guess if there's just announcing a showrunner and stuff now. So that means there's probably not scripts made or anything like that. So my guess is it'll film next year after Man of Tomorrow comes out, and uh, I'm excited. I loved Mr. Terrific in Superman. I thought it was really fun, one of the highlights of the movie, and I'm totally down to see more of him. And I would love to see him interact eventually with the new DCU Batman, if and when we ever get to him. So I'm excited for this. I think it's a great idea and one of the better ideas for a TV show. But moving on to not so good news. So obviously I mentioned Supergirl before. It's still not doing great in the box office. There's rumors that it could come out on streaming by the end of this month, which unfortunately I would not be surprised. I would imagine then that means we probably get a Blu-ray release next month, end of next month, just to kind of get whatever hype that you can off of the theatrical release and try to make some money back through Blu-ray sales. That would be my guess. Thunderbolts kind of did something similar last year where it came out by the end of May, and by the beginning of July I already had the Blu-ray in my hands. So I would imagine that something like that happens with Supergirl, where just try to get it while it's, even if it's not in a positive light, just having that movie in the public uh knowledge and attention right now, getting the Blu-ray out there just to get some sales, so people are like, oh yeah, I watched that movie, I didn't think it was bad, let me buy the Blu-ray. I think that's not a bad strategy, but already we're getting leaks of some turmoil behind the scenes. um According to sources from the Hollywood Reporter, there were competing Supergirl cuts, one from director Greg Gillespie and one from the studio. So James Gunn had a heavier hand in this than we thought, and it sounds like the studio cut is the one that actually made it to theaters. Apparently, Greg Gillespie's had 11 more minutes of footage and delved more into Krem's backstory, which, I mean, we don't get much backstory on him even in the comics, so I really think spending more back time on him for backstory was not a good idea. But according to the Hollywood Reporter, there were uh, creative differences between Gunn and Greg Gillespie, and it was described one way as, quote, not creatively aligned. Apparently, there was a lot of test screenings that were just not getting great scores, and then finally they did two cuts and just waited to see which one got the higher score, and the DC one won out, but not by much, and they decided to send that to theaters. One anonymous filmmaker was quoted as saying, "It happens more than you think, but it's not normal. If a studio is going to put money into the test process, it means they feel strongly about certain things." And of course, we know that James Gunn was highly involved with the musical selection in it. And I mean, overall, if we're already getting leaks about the behind the scenes of this, then that tells me this is kind of. I think, and this is me just guessing. I think this is coming from the studio. I would imagine that this is James Gunn and company trying to save face, especially in with a merger in the wings, and their future not really solidified beyond Man of Tomorrow that comes out next year. I think they're trying to get ahead of this and be like, no, you have to understand this wasn't me. We made a bad call when it came to direct a director, and we had to step in, and we did the best with what we had, kind of a thing. And I don't think this is a Zack Snyder Suicide Squad situation with David Ayer where it's like, oh, the studio came in and completely retooled everything. It sounds like what Gunn did, and I should say him and the rest of his team did, is they came in and took what was there, cut it to how they wanted, and then put it out. And that it does. I don't think that his version was far off from what Greg Gillespie's was. It's again, this isn't like Joss Whedon coming in and reshooting over half the movie and then getting a whole new composer for the score and a whole new tone for the movie. Like, I think what we got was what was going to be made regardless of whether Gunn's cut or Greg Gillespie's cut came out. But it does give me some worry where you have James Gunn. Like, one of the things James Gunn bragged about when he got the job as DC Studios president, or co-president, I should say, it's him and Peter Safran, is that he's like, we won't get anything made until there is a finalized script that we are comfortable with. And obviously, there are some issues with the Supergirl script, and some of that is just you got to put something out and you take the best script that you can get and see what you can do. And so I get it. It's like not every script of every movie is going to be a 10 out of 10. I mean, even with Marvel, when they were at the height of all of it, you still had movies like Thor: The Dark World. You still had, you know, I'm trying to think of some others during phases 2 and 3. You still had like an Ant-Man and the Wasp, where it's like these aren't like life-changing, like, oh, the peak of comic book movies, but like they were still fun despite their flaws. And like that's where I would kind of put Supergirl, where it's like this is like a Thor: The Dark World kind of thing. The only thing is that it's the second movie to come out for the DCEU. So I think the big thing is now is I think James Gunn needs to stop responding to people on threads. Like, on the one hand, it's awesome that he is so transparent. It's refreshing. We don't see Kevin Feige having this level of transparency at all. Like, every once in a while, he may say something that's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." But for the most part, it's not like James Gunn where he will just get asked stuff on threads and he'll just be like, "No." And again, I get some of it is you have to play the corporate game of, well, I'm not gonna be like, yeah, the thing we put out, it was all right. It was a decent script. Like, he came out and said like The Flash was the greatest movie ever. I still think that some of that was just him trying to endear himself to his new bosses, where it's like, look, I'm gonna play ball. I know that the Flash movie isn't going anywhere. It's not a great movie, but obviously I'm not going to take this job as head of DC Films and then immediately be like, oh yeah, and by the way, the movies that we're releasing this year, complete garbage. You should not see them. Like, obviously the dude's not good. It's like, having a head coach in sports. Like, we all know what happened and why the team lost, but the head coach is not going to come out and be like, "Yeah, my quarterback threw 3 interceptions. That's why we lost." Like you're not any good leader is not going to do that. So I get that, but I do think Gunn should probably take a step back because he's starting to give ammo to his critics to shoot him with, and I think finding that balance of being like, yeah, obviously, if someone asks me like, "Hey, you know is David Fleming and John Murphy coming back to do the score for Man of Tomorrow like they did for Superman?" And he says, "Yeah, cool. Tell us stuff like that. That's great. That gets me excited for the movie." But constantly being like, "We have the highest standards here at DC Films. Nothing gets through without multi layers of approval and review and rewrites and stuff." It's like, at the end of the day, these studios need to have movies come out. Like, not every movie studio gets to have a Christopher Nolan or Quentin Tarantino level of respect where and time where they can just rewrite a script 15 times before they're comfortable with and then film it the way they want to. Like, I do think he thought Supergirl was good enough to put into production. And I do think he thought that Greg Gillespie would do a good job. And it might be just one of those things where you get a guy, you hire him, and you think, "Oh, you're going to do great." And then you actually see him work on it. It's like, "Oh, crap. This isn't good. Well, how can we fix this?" And I mean, to his credit, it's not like, again, from the sounds of it, it's not like Greg Gillespie's Supergirl was completely awful. It just sounds like James Gunn came and be like, "Well, I think I can make this a little bit better." And again, I do think some of the hate for Supergirl was overblown. It's not a life changing Supergirl or superhero movie, but it's not horrible. But I do think James Gunn is kind of learning lessons in real time of what it's like to be a studio head versus a director, and just how much extra stuff goes into that. That it's like every time you put a quote out there, it's just another dagger for them to stab you with later on. So I think if he can be a little bit quieter and just say, "Hey, I really thought this script was good," and just maybe not use hyperbole. Just be like, "I support what Gillespie's doing over there with Supergirl. I've seen the working cuts. Looks great. I'm excited. We've worked hard to get the best film that we got out there." Like, it's fine to have some PR speak sometimes. Like, we get it. You're not wanting to be a complete jerk and just throw the guy under the bus. You know, and friction happens a lot in the behind the scenes of movies. Just there's a lot of times, and of course I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there have been plenty of times where I've heard where it's just you have that friction between the director and the studio, and in the end, it still works out okay. And I think again, it's just here. Maybe Greg Gillespie, because he had never directed anything this big before, just had a movie that he was too big for him, and James Gunn needed to step in and take care of it. And and maybe Greg Gillespie's was a little bit better. It sounds like test audiences didn't think that it was much worse than what we ended up getting. So again, to me, I think some of this is just damage control from the studio to be like, "Hey, look, it wasn't us. Like, we did the best we could with what we had." And also, maybe this tells me that maybe after Man of Tomorrow, James Gunn should take a step back from directing for a little bit and maybe just focus on being a studio head. Like, maybe go back to directing once your universe is just kind of in full swing. You've got a solidified foundation. You've had your first job. Like, if you were to say, "Okay, I'm not doing any other movies after Man of Tomorrow until Justice League. Like, maybe I'll direct Justice League." I'd be like, "Okay, fine, perfect." That way you can just focus on making sure Batman and Wonder Woman get solid productions, solid scripts, solid movies out there. That whatever else you've got planned up into Justice League runs smoothly and is of a good quality, and then you can go back to doing directing. I think he's trying to wear too many hats right now, and I wonder if maybe if he didn't have Man of Tomorrow in production while doing this, then maybe he could have been a little bit more involved, kind of like what Kevin Feige did for all of Marvel, where it's just he would come in and be like, "Hey, I'm making sure that this is working well. Like, you still get to tell your story, but we have to make sure it works with what we're doing and what we want to do with this character in the future." And I think him trying to do that while also being a full-time director on Man of Tomorrow might be conflicting with him a little bit. So, again, like I said last week, I don't think that DC Films is doomed or a complete failure. I mean, this is literally the second movie out of the gate. Like, Man or Superman did well enough, bought him some favor. This one was a disappointment for a lot of people. Lanterns comes out next month, so that could get people back in if that's good. And then you got Man of Tomorrow coming out next year, probably the Jimmy Olsen and Gorilla Grodd show as well. So it's like if he can get a few more wins both in the TV realm and the movie realm, he'll be fine. And again, like I've been saying all along, I think next year gotta have an announcement of like, here's when Batman's coming, here's when Wonder Woman's coming. I think that would go a long way to getting people a little bit more like, okay, yeah, Supergirl, I didn't care for that, but Lanterns was good. I enjoyed the Superman sequel, and now we're getting Wonder Woman and Batman. Looks like we're going to be getting a Justice League in the next year or two as well. Okay, I think I can start to feel more comfortable about this. I think that's the biggest thing is you just need to have some momentum built, but the problem is you're not building towards anything. And especially thanks to Marvel, people are used to having shared universes build towards something. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that helps make sure that you keep your universe on track and it gives you a focus. You're not just scatterbrained because I think that's what hurt Marvel a little bit with phases 4 and 5. They didn't really have a solidified end game, pun intended, I guess, for those phases. And so it's kind of like, here's Eternals, here's Shang-Chi, how about Guardians 3, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four? Like, there wasn't really that build up to it. And then of course you had all the shows as well. So I think if he can get an end point of where here's what we're building to, and it should be Justice League. I don't know why it wouldn't. I think that would go a long way to kind of helping fans get more comfortable with his vision of the DC universe. Because again, Superman I think did well enough. It had a lot of stuff to battle of just people being cynical about DC as a brand in general, and also Superman, and then James Gunn taking it over like, okay, this doesn't mean Superman's going to be dancing to pop songs, which he didn't, which I think was a great choice. So I think he needs to really start doing stuff to continue to propel that momentum forward. So we'll see. I think this a lot of it was just to save face as a studio. I, I wouldn't say it's so much to throw Greg Gillespie under the bus, but just being like, look, we want you to know what was going on. That like this, it wasn't like we were just did the final cut of this and we're like, great, cut it. We're gonna do great. This is a 10 out of 10 movie. Like there wasn't any delusion, I think, about this movie of how well it was, just based on the reports that we've gotten. So, but that's all the news that we've had for this week. Like I said, it's kind of going to be kind of light, I think, for the next couple weeks until we get to Comic-Con, and that one will just be a huge extravaganza. I'm really excited for that. I think I'm going to need multiple cups of water for that. But moving on to the paid subscriber questions. We only got one this week, but it's still a fun one. And thank you, as always, for submitting these questions to my paid subscribers. You guys are awesome. Can't thank you enough for your support. And again, if you want to be able to submit questions to the podcast that I answer on here, just upgrade your subscription to the paid tier. Then you'll be able to submit whatever questions you like. You can ask me about my favorite food. I don't know, whatever you want. Just no personal questions. Don't get too personal, please. I'm married. All right, but here we go. Here's our question for the week. If you were completely banned from watching or reviewing sci-fi and comic book movies for an entire year, sad, That would be very sad, first of all. What non-nerd genre or specific movie becomes your absolute go-to, and why? This one this one didn't take me too long, thankfully. But this is a really good question. I really like the idea of that because it really did get me thinking. It's like, how much other stuff do I watch that isn't like comic book related or fantasy related or sci-fi? And I'd have to go with, probably just because Oppenheimer was one of my favorite movies in the last few years, where I came out of that theater and I was already like, I can't wait to buy the Blu-ray. I need to buy the Blu-ray for this. I would say historical dramas. I've always loved history. I was really good at it in school. Just, it was one of those that came naturally to me. I mean, it helps that history it doesn't change like that. That's why I always found it was like, well, George Washington is always going to be the first president of the United States of America. The Allies are always going to win World War II, so it's not like math where, oh wait, all of a sudden, why are we doing proofs of triangles and stuff? Like I said, don't come to me for math. You're not going to be very disappointed. But yeah, historical dramas, I think, is what I would watch. Like, I loved Nolan's Oppenheimer. I think it's his best script. I think it's his best movie, personally, for me. Bridge of Spies from Steven Spielberg, love that. Obviously, Saving Private Ryan. I want to see 1917. I shamefully say that I have not seen that. But even just like westerns, both fiction and nonfiction, I enjoy those. Trying to think of what else. Uh, but yeah, no, just I really love historical dramas. Like, I really want to watch Chernobyl. I haven't gotten around to that. That's another one that I want to watch. But just stuff like that I find really, really interesting, and especially when you can dramatize important times in history, and just, if you can bring me back to that time period to where I'm like, oh, I feel like I've been transported back in time, and that's what Oppenheimer really did for me. I think you've really nailed what you were going for with your biopic. So that would be my answer. Historical dramas. I'd watch those for a year, and I'm sure I'd be able to find some really good ones. But thank you so much for the question. Before we get out of here, obviously, what am I watching currently? I'm watching X-Men 97. I watched the first 3 episodes of that. Really good stuff. My gosh. That show is just awesome. You can tell it's made by people who love the comics, love X-Men, and it just, man, it makes me really want more shows in that vein. Like, give me a Spider-Man one. Like, I saw a quote by the showrunner that said that they want to do like 10 seasons of X-Men 97. I'm like, please do it. Like, you don't, like, as long as, none of the voice actors tragically pass away, like, you don't have to worry about signing, actor schedules as much, or how they're going to look and change physically, because it's like, well, it's a voice, so you just, as long as you can sound like Wolverine after 10 seasons, you can do it. It's like, please do this. And I would love to see like an Avengers 97 or Spider-Man 97, of course, would be awesome. And just keep building, and then as they get into the more modern stuff, you can adapt. Like X-Men 97, I think we could see where like the last 2 seasons adapt like Jonathan Hickman's Krakoa era, or with Spider-Man we could skip one more day, but like have him get married to Mary Jane, and just again do these adaptations of all these big comic runs through the decades. And it's like, do it. Like, I would love that. I'm also watching House of Dragon. Haven't watched the newest episode yet, but I've enjoyed the season thus far. Really good stuff. It's not slow like the second season. It really feels like this is the story they were wanting to get to, but kind of had to wait and slog their way a little bit to in season 2 before they could get here. But really enjoying that. Also with my wife, we watched the first Wicked movie. I haven't seen the play, only know stuff through cultural osmosis, so didn't really know every specific story beat or song or anything like that. But really, I enjoyed the first one. Like, I've always been a fan of musicals, and enjoyed those, and we enjoyed the first one. Going to watch the second one probably later this week. But If you haven't seen those, I recommend it. It's fun. This what I really appreciated about it was how much of the physical sets were there. Like obviously there is some CG, you can clearly tell, but what physical sets are there are very impressive, and the dance choreography in those physical sets is really impressive. Casting is great. Everyone's doing a great job. Like if I had one negative with the first Wicked movies, I feel it's a little overly long. It could have been cut by maybe 20 minutes. I think it didn't need to be 2 hours and 40 minutes. But I'm intrigued to see what the second part is like, especially because if you watch The Wizard of Oz, you know what happens to the Wicked Witch at the end of that. I mean, they show it at the very beginning of the first part, so it'd be kind of cool to see a The Wizard of Oz story, but from the perspective of the Wicked Witch. Like, what was she up to while waiting for Dorothy to show up at her doorstep? Like, I think this could be, I think it could be pretty interesting, and I'm excited for it. But that's all I've been watching so far. And as far as what's on the Substack, obviously, like I said before, got a spoiler article for Supergirl out that you can read if you're a paid member and just upgrade your subscription. You'll be able to have access to that. I also put out an article for all subscribers this week, and it's what characters I think could get their one shot on Disney Plus, kind of like Punisher One Last Kill or Werewolf by Night. What characters I want to see get that treatment next, and I give my pitches there. Like I say in the article, Marvel, feel free to steal my ideas. Just give me a special thanks credit and a residual check, and I'll quietly stay inside my basement. And then next week, I have the monthly rewind review for Mystery Men, so check that out. Be on the lookout for that. And then I will have an article related to Scary Movie 6 of all things, and why I'm happy that it's become a success. It's gotten over 300 million at the box office on like a 30 or 40 million dollar budget. And I talk about in my article why I think this is a good thing. So be on the lookout for that next Wednesday. And that's all I got. So thank you so much for listening. As always, I appreciate your support. I do this because I love it, and I'm glad that you guys enjoy it too. I'll be back next week with more news. Bye.